Hello, as always, Cinema Synopses here, and today I'll tell you about the 2016 adventure film titled The BFG. 10-year-old Sophie, living in a London orphanage, often wakes up during the witching hour, the time between 3 and 4 in the morning, associated with various supernatural phenomena. One night, unable to sleep again, Sophie decides to follow her routine. After arranging letters and scaring away a group of rowdy men on the street, she returns to the dormitory to immerse herself in reading a book when suddenly her red cat hears a noise and jumps onto the balcony. Curious, Sophie disobeys the rules and leaves her bed, cautiously looking outside. She spots a giant's enormous hand lifting a trash bin. The stranger notices the orphan, and despite Sophie's attempt to hide under the covers, the giant grabs her and takes her away. But they move silently and discreetly through the streets until they finally reach a cave. The giant's gloomy dwelling, along with the sight of sharp knives that the stranger sharpens, terrifies the child. Sophie tries to sneak to the window unnoticed in an attempt to escape but ends up dropping some objects, catching the kidnapper's attention. The old man blocks the girl's escape route and then explains that her presence in the land of giants is due to the giant's unwillingness to reveal his existence to humans. Although Sophie promises not to disclose her discovery, the old man remains adamant. He warns that if she dares to venture out alone, she might be eaten by 9 even larger and more malicious giants. As soon as Sophie learns that the kidnapper intends to keep her in his home for the rest of her days, she confidently tells the old man that she will still attempt to escape. Next, the girl becomes agitated, unable to tolerate the mispronunciation of words by the interlocutor, and she directly addresses him about it, immediately apologizing for her rudeness to the big friendly giant BFG. They decide to make peace, and Sophie confesses that she suffers from insomnia when she sees dreams in jars on the giant's table. But the BFG offers to read her a bedtime story. His monotonous and soothing voice lulls the child to sleep. As soon as he notices that Sophie has fallen asleep, the giant quietly leaves and heads to a secret workshop behind the waterfall, where collected dreams are stored. He creates a nightmare for Sophie in which another giant captures her during the escape and devours her alive. Upon waking, she demands an explanation, and the giant reveals the real danger she is in. Sophie learns that her companion is very different from his fellow giants. Besides being 8 meters tall and consuming only vegetarian food, the benevolent giant enjoys drinking a fizzy drink called frobscoddle. The conversation between the BFG and Sophie is interrupted by the infantile leader of the man-eating giants, Fleshlampiator. He barges into the BFG's dwelling, seeking help for his injured finger. Soon, the unwelcome guest detects the scent of a human and starts searching for Sophie, who has hidden herself in a cucumber. The Fleshlampiator fails to find the child and leaves the cave, taking a bottle of frobscoddle and insulting the BFG on his way out. The giant brings Sophie to the dream storage, where he helps her wash up, gives her new clothes, and arranges a place for her to stay. Upon learning that the BFG is going to catch dreams for his work, Sophie expresses her intention to join him, but the BFG firmly refuses, not wanting to put her life in danger. Sophie decides to adopt another strategy and says that she will be safer if the BFG allows her to go with him. Then, Fleshlampiator fails to detect the human scent. Reluctantly, the BFG agrees to take Sophie with him to catch dreams on the hill where the dreams reside. As they exit the cave, the BFG begins to regret his decision, realizing the difficult journey ahead to reach the Hill of Dreams. The companions try to sneak past the sleeping giants, but fail. The Fleshlampiator wakes up and catches the BFG while Sophie hides in the cabin of a broken-down car. The giants taunt and mock the BFG, even throwing him down the hill. The situation changes when clouds gather in the sky, and a heavy rain pours down on the giants, who despise water. But the monsters hastily retreat to their caves, while Sophie and her kind host escape. Fleshlampiator discovers Sophie's lost blanket. Once the evil giants are behind them, Sophie tells her companion that he shouldn't let others mistreat him. The BFG responds that he cannot directly confront the other giants, so he fights them in his own way by catching dreams. Finally, the duo reaches the top of the hill, finding themselves in the land of dreams. The BFG shares the wonders that manifest on clear nights in this place. He also admits that he can hear everything the inhabitants of the land whisper under the starry sky. Before leaping into the Emerald Lake, the giant confesses that someone once called him the Big Friendly Giant. Sophie follows her colossal friend, crossing the water's surface to the other side. Suddenly, the good-natured old man notices a rare dream. It's a golden light dream that comically tries to catch with a net but fails. Then, the bright dream floats towards the frozen girl, and the giant manages to hold the dream in his hands and trap it in a jar. Sophie asks her friend what the captured dream is about, and the BFG reveals that she herself is part of that vision. Then the girl frolics around, trying to catch other glowing dreams, but they don't want to be caught by her. Eventually, she manages to catch a terrible nightmare, which the giant immediately takes and locks in a jar before disappearing into the thick fog. Startled by the joke, Sophie can't find the giant, but he is already waiting for her in the ordinary world. The orphan decides to call the Big Friendly Giant BFG, and he happily agrees to that. They return to the city to give people pleasant dreams. The BFG shares his origin story, revealing that he has no parents, and his age is almost as old as the earth. Using his magical trumpet, he places a dream in a local boy's sleep, allowing the boy to participate in a phone call with the President of the United States. On their way home, the BFG's keen hearing detects sadness in someone's heart, and moments later, he sees his fellow giants, who were likely visiting the town for their cruel habit of preying on defenseless orphan children. Sophie mentions that she lost her blanket in the land of giants, unaware of the concern in her friend's eyes. Later, she wakes up on the steps of the orphanage, where the BFG brought her out of fear. The orphan calls for the giant, asking him to take her with him, but he gently refuses, revealing the fate of his past friend, another brave orphan like Sophie, whom he couldn't protect from his cruel kin. Undeterred, Sophie bravely declares that she is not afraid of the monsters and is willing to stand against them together with her new friend. However, the BFG, unwilling to put her in danger, leaves. Sophie and her roommate Penura return to the dormitory with the ginger cat. But after the adventurous experiences, sleep eludes the little girl. Not believing that the kind-hearted giant is gone for good, Sophie decides to take a desperate action. She jumps out of the window, hoping that the BFG will catch her. The giant doesn't disappoint, and he catches her just in time. Realizing that the brave orphan won't back down from her words, the BFG returns home with her. They both understand that the Fleshlampiator and his gang already know about Sophie's existence because of her lost blanket. They try to come up with a plan, but their efforts seem futile as the giant's leaders soon arrive in the Dream Country's storage. The Fleshlampiator orders the giants to find the child, and the BFG watches in horror as the results of his work crumble before his eyes. He tries to appeal to their conscience, stating that in the past, giants never harmed humans, but the Fleshlampiator ignores him. Sophie is forced to leave her hiding place to avoid being discovered, and she ends up in the room of the BFG's former friend. There, she notices a portrait of Queen Victoria. Seeing that the Fleshlampiator is just a step away from discovering her, the kind-hearted giant decides to stand up to the attackers. Using fire and water, he drives the intruders away, accusing them of bringing shame to the giant race. Meanwhile, an idea sparks in Sophie's mind. Sophie convinces the BFG to accompany her to London to meet the now ruling Queen Elizabeth Roman II and solve the problem of the evil giants once and for all. Together, they create a terrifying nightmare for the Queen about giants devouring children from orphanages. In the dream, the BFG and Sophie are also added to the scenario. In the middle of the night, the duo sneaks into Buckingham Palace and sends the created nightmare to the Queen. Upon waking up, the frightened Queen Elizabeth confides in her assistant, Mary, about what she saw. Mary comforts the queen and shows her a newspaper article about missing children. After the queen asks Mary to open the curtains, the BFG and Sophie are spotted on the windowsill. Sophie explains the situation to the queen, telling her about the BFG and their plan to defeat the evil giants. But just as the giant appears in the royal garden, he is surrounded by palace guards. However, Queen Elizabeth intervenes and allows the polite 8-meter-tall BFG to introduce himself to Her Majesty. Queen Elizabeth calls the heads of other nations, informing them about the child-eating giants. Sophie helps tidy up, and then the queen invites her guests to have dinner with her. But the BFG is impressed by the various delicacies and admits that he doesn't find cucumbers as tasty anymore. When the army generals arrive at the palace, Queen Elizabeth declares a military campaign against the giant country. But the BFG promises to guide the soldiers to his homeland. 6 hours later, the British Army reaches the specified location. The BFG shares his plan with Sophie. He intends to unleash the nightmare he caught with Sophie the previous night on the bloodthirsty giants. Before executing the plan, the BFG and Sophie have a conversation on the hill. He promises never to forget her and promises to respond to any of her requests. Afterward, Sophie descends with the nightmare jar to the sleeping giants. The Fleshlampiator wakes up and notices her, but she manages to break the jar just in time. Nightmares take hold of all the giants except Fleshlampiator, who prevents the bad dream from entering his consciousness. He intends to grab Sophie, but suddenly the BFG attacks him. At the same time, the British Army starts attacking the evil monsters. The soldiers tie up the giants and take them to a deserted island, leaving them only with cucumbers for food. After these events, Sophie moves to live in Buckingham Palace with the Queen. She tells the Queen about her dream of the big and friendly giant, who now peacefully resides in the land of giants. When Sophie feels nostalgic, she opens the window and greets her friend with the words, "Good morning, BFG." The giant, sitting at his home, hears her and responds with a smile. If you enjoyed my retelling, please support the channel with a comment of more than 4 words. It greatly helps promote the video. Goodbye.